Everybody wants to save in taxation this year. No one thinks about the long run. Why don't you max out your 401k and IRAs and you'll kick that can down the road and pay taxes at some point in the future. It's not only you're going to pay taxes on the dollars that you put into the 401k or IRA, but you're also going to pay taxes on all the growth.
The number of 401k millionaires just hit an all-time high, with nearly 500,000 individuals with a valuation of $1 million in their 401ks and almost 400,000 individuals with over $1 million in their IRAs. This is part of a broader trend of tax-deferred retirement growth, with the average 15-year Gen X investor having a balance of over $500,000. If you're fortunate enough to achieve these levels of success in your tax-deferred retirement account, congratulations. You've made wise choices and leveraged the power of compounding to grow your nest egg. But here's the thing. Success brings its own set of challenges. With these large balances in these accounts, you could be setting yourself up for a significant tax hit when it comes time to withdraw those funds in retirement. I'm joined today by Patricia Lloyd. Patricia is the founder of Ardent Wealth Management, a firm that specializes in catering to the financial needs of high net worth individuals, to discuss why simply keeping your money in these traditional accounts might not be the best strategy moving forward. We'll also discuss an alternative approach that could help you avoid some of these potential pitfalls and provide even greater tax strategies. All right, Pat, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so to start off with, let's talk about the success of 401k plans. Could you briefly walk us through why 401ks have been such a popular choice for retirement savings over the years?
Well, like anybody who comes to a tax professional, everybody wants to save in taxation this year. No one thinks about the long run effects of what it means to save in taxes this year. So most people, go to their tax professionals and they say, how do I pay less this year? And the answer typically is, why don't you max out your 401k and IRA so that money will be tax deferred and you'll kick that can down the road and pay taxes at some point in the future. But what everybody forgets to think about when they're making that choice is not only you're going to pay taxes on the dollars that you put into the 401k or IRA, but you're also going to pay taxes on all the growth. And when you really stop and think about growth, you can use what's called the rule of 72 to kind of figure this out. If you earn 7.2% per year on average in your IRA or 401k, you're going to double your account value every 10 years. That means these people you're talking about that are millionaires in their accounts today, that million in 10 years will go to 2. The 2 million in another 10 years will go to 4. The 4 million in another 10 years goes to 8. So we're talking a lot of taxes on all those dollars and that growth.
So what are some of the key features of 401k plans that have made them particularly effective for growing wealth over the long term, or some of the reasons why they've become so popular?
They became popular because a lot of companies were doing away with their plans that they had in place to take care of their employees. So people started saving for their own retirement using these vehicles. They were nice because people could save a little bit out of every paycheck and not really kind of feel the fact that they were putting this much money away. When you're slowly putting a little bit in every time, out of every paycheck, you're also dollar cost averaging into the markets. There was a lot of different features about them that were sold to employees as a great way to save for retirement if their company didn't have any kind of other defined benefit or defined contribution plan in place for them.
Okay, so I know many people have benefited from employer matching in their 401ks. Can you explain a little bit about how this contributed to the growth of their retirement savings?
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of companies that are doing matches in their 401k. So a lot of companies will say, if you put in 4%, we'll match 4%. And I tell everybody, definitely take advantage of that. That's free money coming from your company. So you always want to take advantage of that anytime those benefits are offered by companies. And, it was a good way for the company to control how much they were having to put away for employees compared to the old time when they were pretty much fully funding people's retirement.
Okay. So it seems like the combination of tax advantages and compounding growth has really helped people build substantial nest eggs. But how have market conditions over the past few decades also contributed to the success of 401k accounts?
Yeah, market conditions are, make a big difference in these 401k accounts because most plans have investment options underneath the plan. Typically there's, anywhere from 10 to 12, maybe mutual funds, and you've got different, types of risk investments you can put in there. You can be in the market, you could be in bonds, depending on what your appetite for risk was. And a lot of people knowing that their dollar cost averaging in, meaning every time that money's withheld from every paycheck, money gets bought into these different funds, they're able to feel like they can take a little bit more risk because they're getting the benefit of sometimes I'm buying when things are low, sometimes I'm buying when they're high. So you're kind of getting that average of the cost of when you're buying in. So that works well for employees. And then, the growth in the funds have really helped them grow their accounts towards retirement. And if you look at the rule of 72, if you earn an average of 7.2%, you'll double your account value in 10 years. So that's kind of the growth for like an S&P 500 type fund would be, is you'd probably come close to doubling about every 10 years.
Okay, so 401ks have been fantastic for growth, but I understand there can be significant downsides, especially for people with large balances. Can you walk us through what some of those downsides might be?
Yeah, one of the major downsides of them is the taxation. You're saving in taxes while you're putting money in because you're putting pre-tax dollars in typically into the plan, as well as anything that your employer matches is also considered a pre-tax dollar item for you as well because they're taking a deduction for the amount that they put into your 401k. So the kicking the can down the road taxation-wide is really the biggest downfall of them. A lot of people have been told or, bought into the fact that they were going to be in lower tax rates or have less money that need in retirement, which doesn't necessarily hold true for most people. Typically, you're spending about the same amount, maybe in different ways than you were while you were working, but the dollar need during retirement isn't necessarily less like a lot of people were told.
So for high net worth individuals in particular, why might staying in a 401k long term result in higher taxes or other financial disadvantages?
So for a high net worth individual, they're looking at if you're needing the same amount of income as you had while you were working and you're making a decent amount of income, you could still be pulling much higher amounts out of an IRA account. And while those pulling IRA money out is going to have the full tax effect of it in the year that you pull it, you also have other issues that combine with that. There's things, you'll hear IRMA mentioned all over the place, and it's an acronym, but what it talks about is how they determine how much you pay for Medicare while you're in retirement. And the more money that hits your tax return, the higher your income is on your tax return, the more you pay for those Medicare benefits. So when you're looking at things like at age 73 now, you have required minimum distributions from your 401k or IRA accounts. And so they're going to require you take a certain amount out of those accounts, whether you need that income or not. And that number grows every year because what they're really trying to do is force all the money out of those accounts during your lifetime.
Can you explain more about the RMDs and the problems that come with that specifically?
Sure. Yeah, the RMDs are, set up where there's a factor. So you take your 1231 balances, you divide it by whatever that factor is for your age, and this is all in the IRS code. And every year that factor is going to make the amount you have to pull out of your IRAs more and more each year. And for a lot of people that have kind of a set amount that they know they're going to need every year, as they age, they're ending up having to pull more out than they actually need to live off of. And the consequence of that is that they have to pay the taxes on that, whether they needed to pull the money out or not.
Okay, well, it seems like those factors could lead to some definitely significant unexpected tax burdens in retirement. Are there any other risks that people might face if they keep a large portion of their retirement savings in a 401k or an IRA?
Sure, yeah. There's also some other changes that happen that a lot of people aren't aware of, and that is if you leave 401k or IRA assets to your beneficiaries, it used to be that they could spread out taking that money over what would have been the rest of your lifetime. But they've changed that now, and they're forcing all of the money out of those accounts within 10 years. So if your kids are successful, and maybe they're lawyers, doctors, what have you, and they've got high income on their own, and now they're forced to pull money out of these accounts on top of their income, you could be pushing them into like the highest tax brackets every year, even if they tried to spread out, taking equal amounts over 10 years.
Okay. Are there implications with 401ks and estate tax when they transfer, or do they transfer as just income? How is that calculated and figured?
No, they're definitely included as part of your overall net worth when you're looking at estate taxes. So if you're leaving large balances in, 401ks and IRAs on top of lots of other assets, and that drives you above the overall estate tax limits, which, are fairly high today, but it's definitely a risk for going forward that those numbers will continue to be reduced in size. You could be looking at them not only having to pay regular taxes on the money as they have to pull it out over those 10 years, but also causing an estate tax issue where you're now paying another 40% to the IRS on anything that's over whatever that limit is at that point in time when you pass away.
So it seems like the longer you stay in a 401k and the more you accumulate into it, the more your drawbacks start to become. A lot of people have considered Roth conversions as an alternative. Can you explain what a traditional Roth conversion is and why it might be seen as a good option for some people?
Yeah, sure. A Roth conversion is the process of pulling money out of a regular IRA account or 401k and transferring it over to a Roth IRA or 401k. And the benefits of that is the growth on that Roth account is never going to be taxed. The downfall of it is in the year that you move this money over, you pay ordinary income taxes on whatever amount you move over. So if you're still working and you say are making $200,000 a year and you try to move money out of your IRA account over to your Roth, now you're driving yourself up into the highest tax brackets potentially while you're trying to do these Roth conversions.
Right. So now you've lost all of the tax deferred advantage because now you're paying it at the highest rates possible in your lifetime or in your working years.
Exactly. And the alternative could have possibly been had you saved to a Roth 401k while you were employed. And not all employers are offering these. They're kind of a newer aspect of the offerings in the 401k world. Had you saved along the way, you would have paid tax in those smaller amounts every year while you were in the savings mode versus now when you already have all this money in savings, you have the problem of doing this Roth conversion driving yourself into higher tax brackets, but you also have the issue of now if I have to send in this big check to the IRS this year, now I've lost compounding on those dollars that I would have had in savings as well. So it's kind of a double hit that you feel, and it makes it really hard to look at it and go, how long is it going to take me to make up for the fact I had to pay these taxes now? And a lot of people focus strictly on that and don't focus on what about all the earnings that I'm now not going to have to pay tax on. And so it's really hard to kind of wrap your head around it without really looking at things over like lifetime taxation rather than just what's happening in that year.
Okay. What are kind of the differences between a Roth and a regular 401k that makes them distinct and unique?
So the difference between a regular 401k or IRA and a Roth 401k or IRA is that the money that goes into an IRA or a regular 401k is pre-tax dollars, meaning you have not paid taxes on that money yet. So basically you're kicking the can down the road knowing when I pull money out of those, I'm going to pay tax on everything that comes out of those accounts. The difference with a Roth 401k or an IRA is that you're putting after-tax dollars into the account today, and you're never going to pay tax on any of the growth coming out down the road. And you're not forced to take money out during your lifetime from a Roth. However, the same rules still apply to anybody that inherits those accounts. They still have to take all the money out of those accounts within 10 years. It will not cause tax consequences, but this was also a change that's kind of happened where people could spread that out over their lifetimes before. Now they're not allowed to do that. There's a 10-year time frame. And the reason being is that the government doesn't want you to keep money in there growing, tax-free forever. So they're kind of forcing these issues to get money out.
Okay. Obviously, there are some serious issues with even converting to a Roth 401k if you didn't start one to begin with. Are there any other drawbacks to a traditional Roth conversion that people should be aware of?
I think just looking at what tax bracket you're going to throw yourself into, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that should go into looking at whether doing a Roth conversion is right for you. And there's also some alternatives out there to doing a Roth conversion that can make a lot of sense for people where they still can gain some growth on the money that they have to send to the IRS. But it's really looking at what is the tax effect today versus the lifetime taxation if you don't do it. It's comparing those numbers.
Okay, so what are some of the other strategies that you recommend to your clients at Ardent Wealth Management that could offer similar or even greater benefits, but without some of those specific drawbacks?
There's some insurance products that are out there, and I got to tell you, one of them is probably the highest used by our Congress people to get around taxation on dollars later on. And so, but there's a lot of regulation in that industry, and what they actually let us show people on paper is not how these products actually can work. So it's kind of an interesting process to take people through because the government's not wanting you to see how good using these strategies could be, and that's why they put those regulations in place, because they really don't want people doing them.
Well, that sucks, because I'd like to hear more about these alternative strategies, like how do they work in practice and what benefits can they offer, particularly for high net worth individuals?
Yeah, so one of the biggest ones, and probably the only other one, is using a life insurance product to do something similar to a Roth conversion. It's not truly a Roth conversion. You do pull money out of your IRA or 401k account just like you would do with doing a Roth conversion. You pay taxes on it now. You'd put it into this life insurance alternative, and it acts very similarly to a Roth, where you're never going to pay tax on anything coming out of it. And you can use it the same way we would as a Roth for income and things like that during retirement. However, there's another piece of it that's kind of interesting and nice, is that when you put money into these products, you can actually borrow the money back out of it to pay the taxes. And what happens with that is you can create what we call arbitrage on those dollars. So say you converted $100,000, we needed to pull $25,000 out to pay the taxes. The policy still acts like the whole $100,000 is in there being invested, even though $25,000 is gone and has gone to the IRS to pay the taxes. But what happens is you can create some arbitrage. So there's some cost to pulling the loan, but then if you're looking at the investments that are within them and what you typically can earn on them, you're able to create maybe a 3 or 4% return on dollars that you actually don't have anymore. And there's not an opportunity to do that with a true Roth conversion.
Say I'm what do you define as a high net worth individual? Like say for instance, like 401k balances. What level do you think it's important to really start looking at this kind of a conversion?
I think if you've got $250,000 amassed in your 401k and IRAs, I mean, it's time to look at, should I continue saving this way, or are there other options that are better for me?
Okay, and if I find myself asking that question, what's the next step? Where do I go to find someone who can analyze these questions and all the implications involved and find the best fit?
Yeah, I think that's where people have really struggled to find somebody to help them. Typically when you go to your CPA at the end of the year, they don't even know what you have in your 401k account. There's no reporting whatsoever that's handed over during the time that you're doing your tax return that tells your CPA that, hey, I have all this money in my 401k. Is this a problem for the future? And most CPA firms are so busy just cranking out thousands of tax returns that they don't even bother to ask their clients. They're not truly looking at planning. They're just dealing with aftermath of what's already happened the year before, filling out your tax forms, getting everything filed correctly. And then you've got financial planners that are out there, or investment advisors that are doing some financial planning maybe for you, and they talk about maybe a little bit of the tax aspects of what you're doing, but most of them aren't qualified to really talk about tax. And if they don't have those qualifications, whoever they're working for won't let them talk to you about tax because they don't want the liability of it. So I think that's where I see this hole that happens for people, where they're not really getting good tax strategy and planning for their lifetime and for what their retirement's going to look like, because they don't have access to someone who really focuses on that. And that's why I've really built Ardent Wealth Management in the direction of not only focusing on all the other things that are important, like inflation and, market risk and all the things that people need to think about as far as planning for retirement, but really focusing on that tax aspect of it as well. And, focusing and seeing, okay, if we plan out your lifetime taxation and don't just focus on taxation today, how much can we save you over your lifetime? And it's a unbelievable amount of money for most people when they just make a few little strategy changes to how they're saving for retirement. And we can run those numbers for people and look at it and say, okay, if you stay doing what you're doing today, this is likely what your outcome is going to be. And we usually do some factoring as to like what taxes may look like in the future, because right now everybody thinks we're in really high tax rates, but we're not at all.
Can you explain a little bit more about the perception of taxes? Because you hear everybody, and especially right now, it's an election year, people are chomping at the bit about needing tax cuts and taxes are too high, but that might be a misconception based on historical data. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, when you really go back and look at the whole thing, they came up with the 401k to begin with to replace pensions, okay? At that point in time, it was the late 70s. If you earned over $100,000, you were in a 70% tax bracket.
Right.
Compared to today, if you were in roughly $100,000, you might be in like the 22% tax bracket at most. And so those are very vastly different numbers. So it was easy in the late 70s when this came up to say, oh, this is a great thing for you. You're going to put money in here and likely you're going to, pull it out when taxation is lower. Well, sure, when taxes were they were when that came out, that was a true statement. But today things have really changed. We're in lower tax brackets, and we've amassed quite a deficit that the government's going to at some point have to figure out and pay off. I mean, we're not going to be able to continue to kick that can down the road forever. And so they're looking at these things and saying, okay, estate taxes is one of the ways that they'll start to look to raise dollars, as well as they know money's going to be coming out of all these 401ks and IRAs, especially for the boomer generation that's now approaching or in retirement already.
Can you speak to that a little bit more? Because I've heard the boomers referred to as the wealthiest generation.
They definitely hold most of the wealth in the country, and there's going to be trillions of dollars that will change hands from them to their beneficiaries over the next 10 to 20 years. And so that's where when you start to look at that stuff, you can see why they've made some of the changes to the tax code that they have. Now they don't let you stretch out taking money out of IRA accounts. It's 10-year max. These are things to push to get more taxation. We're also coming up on estate tax exemptions that were very high of over $13 million per person, getting cut at the beginning of 2026 in half to roughly $7 million. And most people still are sitting back today going, oh, I'm going to be okay. I'm not over $7 million. But here's the problem. There's no guarantee that's going to stay at $7 million. That number has moved around over time to as low as $1 million or $3 million. So it's definitely something someone should be looking forward to and like planning for, because you don't know what the exemption limit's going to be on the day that you pass away. And so I tell people, like, plan for some of that now. There's ways to use up some of the exemption that's in place today, and protect assets for future generations. And that planning is like critical to be done before these cuts start to happen.
There's a gigantic ball of cash that the government is just sitting back like the wolf in the cartoon, licking its lips, waiting for them to be able to get their hands on it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're seeing this as an answer to the problem, and I think that they'll mess more with the estate taxes than they will with regular taxation. Because let's face it, if someone passed away and they're no longer with us, it's a lot harder for a dead person to argue over taxation on, an estate that's left to their heirs than it is on the day-to-day people that are struggling to pay, for their groceries and other things. So when you start to mess with regular taxes, you start to affect middle class and other people. And, so they're looking for other ways to come up with those tax dollars. So that's why I really feel estate taxes is a big one that people need to be focused on today, because that's definitely a place they're going to go to for money.
Okay. So say you're someone who has looked at all this now and you're deciding like, hey, I need to find some direction, maybe to finding a person who can speak to both the financial and the tax implications put together. You've mentioned that that's something that your firm does well. Can you kind of elaborate why that is? That what makes your firm more unique in the ability to handle those two things?
Yeah, so I mean, my firm, I'm obviously a CPA and a certified financial planner. I do investment work and other things as well, and I do look at all the aspects, but I've always looked at people's financial world as like kind of these puzzle pieces. And so you got a tax puzzle piece, you have an investment puzzle piece, you've got all these different, you've got risk and, of having long-term care and different things that you need to focus on when you're looking at someone's overall financial plan. And I just find like that tax piece just is never focused on. It's just ignored. And so everybody thinks their biggest risks are if I lose a bunch of money when I retire in my investments, that's a major risk because now I can't take as much money out of my assets. They look at inflationary risk. Will I have enough money and not run out of money in my lifetime if inflation stays really high? But no one stops to think about or ever really talks about, what if tax rates go through the roof? What then? What are my alternatives? Especially knowing that you have these required minimum distributions that you're not necessarily going to be able to control your taxation in any one year, based off of the fact that you have to pull money out. And if you don't, the penalties are 50% of the money you should have pulled out. They're really high. And so they force the issue on a lot of these things. And unfortunately, there's just not enough people trained in this industry in the tax aspects of it to be able to really talk about what that all means, that piece of it means.
Okay. So if I'm someone who really has heard what you've said and wants to take a look at working with you, how can we go about doing that?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I offer a 30-minute complimentary consultation where people could get on a phone call with me. I work with people all over the country, so I'm not limited to any particular area. And, we just talk through, where are you at? What are you worried about? What are the things you need to focus on? And what kind of planning have you done so far? And where can we kind of take it from what you have and then figure out the rest of it? And add that tax aspect into it. And so we have people that work with us in all different kinds of ways. And, some of them are in the planning aspect, and some of them decide, hey, I like the fact that you look at all this stuff and I don't have to go to all these different people. Because the biggest thing in this industry that I think is a problem is, I asked people that come to me and I'm like, do you have a CPA? And they're like, yes. And I said, okay, do you have a, investment advisor? And they're usually yes. And a financial planner. Yep, I have one of those. And they might be the same person or they might not. And then they have an insurance guy, that they talk to if they need life insurance or any of their insurances. And my next question is, how often do you talk to them? The answer is usually not enough for what's going on in their life. And then my last question is, how often do they talk to one another? And the answer is generally never. Like, they don't even know one another exists. So how can you truly get comprehensive planning, and incorporate what should my estate plan look like? What should all these different pieces look like if these advisors are out there just handling their one piece? And there's no quarterback that ever brings it all back together to make sure that all the pieces are working in concert the way that they should be for you.
Okay, so if they want to schedule with you, I'm sure that you have some sort of process to get in touch, website, links.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a website, but the best way to really get answers to your what's going on in your own life is to click the link towards our calendar and just book a complimentary 30-minute consultation. Usually during that 30 minutes, I can do enough question and answer session and hear kind of what's keeping you up at night that you're worried about, but also maybe point out some things that I see in what you've got going on and give you some idea of how we could move forward to help you to a better place than where you're at right now.
Okay, well, we'll throw those links in the description and the show notes. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think that if I had to add anything, do something now. I mean, we've got some great stuff in place, but it's going to go away. And the longer you wait towards like when these changes are going to happen with estate taxes and things like that, it's going to be harder and harder to find anybody that's not already overwhelmed busy that works in this area. So I would say just be proactive and take some action now, whether it's with me or somebody else.
Thank you so much for your time. And like I said, we've just discussed here all the implications of staying in a 401k, and maybe it's time to start looking, getting out. So again, we'll put those links down below, and thanks for your time.
Thank you.